Every time prices rise, you lose a little more of your freedom. Groceries, rent, gas, they all inch higher month after month. And if you've ever felt like your paycheck just doesn't stretch the way it used to, you're not imagining it. You're watching the quietest transfer of wealth in human history, one that repeats every generation. Because inflation doesn't just make things more expensive, it rearranges who owns the future. Welcome to the Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. For most people, inflation feels like chaos. Prices out of control, savings eroding, the system slipping. But for the powerful, inflation is order. It's how the modern economy keeps itself alive. It's how governments pay for wars without raising taxes. It's how corporations erase their debt. And it's how the wealthy watch their assets multiply while everyone else scrambles to keep up. So, the question isn't why inflation happens. It's why it's allowed to happen again and again. To understand that, you have to go back to a time when inflation was treated like a national emergency, not an economic target. In the early 20th century, most major economies were tied to gold. Every paper note was backed by metal stored in a vault. That made money scarce and stable. It also meant governments couldn't print their way out of mistakes. If you ran a deficit, you either raised taxes or admitted defeat. Inflation, when it happened, was usually the product of war or collapse, a loss of discipline. The idea that a government could choose inflation on purpose would have been unthinkable. But then everything broke. The Great Depression in the 1930s shattered the illusion of monetary restraint. Prices fell. Wages collapsed. Banks failed. The economy froze. Not from inflation, but deflation. When money gained value over time, nobody spent it. Debt became heavier by the day. It was an economic death spiral. And it changed everything about how policymakers thought about money. It became a strategy, a tool, a weapon, a method of control. Because once governments and powerful institutions realized what inflation could do, they never wanted to give it up again. Let us break this down step by step, in simple English, so you can see the pattern clearly. Imagine a world where money could not be printed freely. A world where every dollar had to be backed by gold, where governments could not cheat, where mistakes had consequences. That's what the early 1900s were like. Money was honest. Prices were stable. Savings held value. But then the Great Depression destroyed that stability. People stopped spending. Banks collapsed. Debt became unbearable. The economy froze like ice. Leaders tried everything. Nothing worked. Finally, they realized something powerful. If money keeps getting stronger, nobody spends. But if money becomes weaker, everyone is forced to move. So the mission secretly changed. Instead of protecting the value of money, governments started managing the value of money. Inflation stopped being a problem and became a solution. World War II left countries buried in debt. Some owed more than they produced in an entire year, and they couldn't pay it back honestly. So what did they do? They let inflation eat the debt away. Prices slowly rose. Money quietly lost value. Debt melted. And most people didn't even notice. Here's the hidden truth. Inflation is a tax that nobody votes for, but everybody pays. From the 1950s to the 1960s, governments realized you don't have to repay debt if your currency loses value fast enough. It worked so well, they never stopped doing it. This moment is the big bang of modern money. President Richard Nixon did one thing that changed the entire world. He ended the dollar's link to gold. Before 1971, a dollar was a promise that you could exchange it for real gold. After 1971, a dollar was a promise backed by nothing, except the government's word. This is when money stopped being value and became policy. This is when the rules changed permanently. Now governments could print as much money as they wanted. Banks could lend unlimited money. Debt could grow without limits. Inflation wasn't a glitch anymore. It became the operating system of the global economy. Here's the simple math the rich understand. Inflation makes cash weaker. Inflation makes debt cheaper. Inflation makes assets more valuable. So ask yourself, who holds the most assets? The rich. Who holds the most debt? Governments and corporations. Who holds cash? Normal people. See the problem? This is why inflation feels like drowning if you're ordinary, and feels like flying if you're wealthy. Let's break it down even simpler. If you save money, inflation destroys it. If you borrow money for assets, inflation makes you rich. That's why. Rich people borrow to buy houses. Rich people borrow to buy companies. Rich people borrow to buy land. Rich people borrow to buy assets that inflate, while the average person saves cash, works for wages, pays higher prices, gets weaker buying power. Every year, it's a system designed to reward the players at the top. There is a 300-year-old rule that explains everything. Those closest to new money get rich first. When central banks create money, it doesn't go to regular people. It goes to Banks, hedge funds, government programs, corporations, these groups spend it while the money is still fresh and strong. By the time it reaches workers and normal households, prices have already gone up. You're getting the money after it's been diluted. This is why inflation is the quietest wealth transfer ever created. It moves money upward, from the bottom to the top, without anyone noticing in real time. After 1971, inflation became permanent. But economists didn't want the public to panic. So they created a story. 2% inflation is good for the economy. Sounds scientific, right? But here's the truth. At 2% inflation, your money loses half its buying power every 30 years. That means your savings shrink, your future becomes more expensive, your retirement becomes harder, your salary can't keep up. But the wealthy? They don't save money. They invest money. When inflation rises, their stocks go up, their property goes up, their businesses raise prices, their debt becomes cheaper. Inflation becomes their business partner and your enemy. When banks collapsed in 2008, the world should have reset. But instead, central banks printed trillions and gave it to banks, corporations. This caused a tsunami of asset inflation. Commodities went up. Who owned the assets? The rich. Who didn't? Regular working people. They got nothing, while their income stayed flat. This was policy. Governments sent money directly to households. Demand exploded, supply chains broke. Inflation came back like a monster. But even during the crisis, housing became unaffordable, stocks hit record highs because inflation always benefits those who own assets. This time, people noticed, but they still didn't understand the deeper truth. Inflation is not an accident. Inflation doesn't only change money. It teaches you, spend now, waiting costs more, invest even if you don't understand. Because saving hurts, work harder. Because your paycheck is shrinking, inflation creates the perfect citizen, always worried. And that's exactly what the system needs to keep running. Because inflation rewards investment access and it punishes wages, time, patience. The rules are simple. If you own cash, you sink. If you borrow for assets, you win. If you borrow for consumption, you lose. The rich know this. That's why inflation feels like a ghost pushing you backward while pushing someone else forward. No matter what governments say. Why? Governments collapse under their debt, corporations go bankrupt, banks stop lending, consumers stop spending, the entire economy freezes. Inflation isn't the fire. Inflation is the oxygen. And the world we built cannot breathe without it. You cannot escape inflation. But you can position yourself so inflation works for you, not against you. Because the truth is simple. Inflation is either the force that drowns you or the wind that lifts you. It depends entirely on how you play the game. Let's break it down clearly, simply, emotionally, so that by the end of this section, you'll know exactly what to do. Most people think, my money is safe in the bank. But that's not true. It feels safe because you can see the number sitting there. But the number is not the value. The value is disappearing every year. Look at this. $100 today buys less food, less fuel, less electricity, less life than it bought 3 years ago. Inflation silently steals your power $1 at a time. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't warn you that it just eats. This is why rich people never hold too much cash. Saving money feels responsible, but in an inflation world, it's dangerous. Because the more you save, the more you lose. Inflation pushes prices up, but not all prices rise equally. There are 3 types of things in your life. 1. Things that lose value: cash, savings, salary, time. 2. Things that keep value: gold, land, commodities. 3. Things that grow value: real estate, stocks, businesses, intellectual property. The rich spend their life buying types 2 and 3. The poor stay stuck in type 1. This is why inflation destroys the bottom and multiplies the top. Owning assets is not investing. It's survival. The rules changed long ago, and most people never got the memo. This is where people get confused. Most of your life, you were told, debt is bad. Avoid it. But rich people have a different rule. Bad debt buys things that lose value. Good debt buys things that rise with inflation. If you borrow money to buy clothes, phones, cars, vacations, that debt destroys you. But if you borrow to buy a rental property, a business, a farm, equipment, cash flow assets, anything that goes up over time, inflation pays off your debt for you. It's like a cheat code built into the system. When inflation rises, your dollar becomes weaker, but so does the dollar you owe, meaning your debt becomes easier to pay back. Inflation helps the borrower and crushes the saver. This is why governments love inflation. This is why corporations love inflation. This is why wealthy investors love inflation. It makes their debt cheaper and their assets more valuable at the same time. You cannot win the inflation game with a salary alone. You can work harder, work smarter, work longer, work faster, but you'll still fall behind. Why? Because your wage grows in slow steps, and inflation grows in quiet jumps. Every year, rent rises, food rises, fuel rises, healthcare rises. Education rises, but your wage? It rises only when someone allows it. The system is designed so you never catch up. This is why you need a second source of growth, not a second job. A job can feed you, but assets feed your future. Most people hesitate. They wait for the right time, the right price, the right moment, the right savings, the right market, but inflation does not wait. Every day you delay, prices rise without your permission. Inflation punishes the slow. Inflation punishes the afraid. Inflation punishes the people who hesitate. But inflation rewards the person who buys early, the person who invests small, the person who takes steady steps, the person who learns instead of fears, the person who builds instead of waits. Inflation doesn't care if you start big or start small. It only cares that you start. This is the part that hurts, but it's the truth. Governments cannot stop inflation because they need it. Banks cannot stop inflation because they profit from it. Corporations cannot stop inflation because they grow from it. Nobody is coming to rescue you. Inflation will keep rising, slowly, quietly, endlessly, because the system is built on inflation. Your only protection is understanding the game and playing it the way the winners do. A future engine is anything that grows faster than inflation. Here are the top engines. Real estate rents rise with inflation. Property values rise with inflation. Debt becomes cheaper. Stocks companies raise prices. Revenue grows. Assets inflate. Gold protects you during currency decline. A side business, your income rises on your terms, not a boss's. Digital assets, selectively, but only if you understand the risk. Skills, the only asset nobody can take away. When inflation rises, the only safe place is forward. You cannot stand still. Standing still is moving backward. Inflation has a pattern. It pulls the rich higher. It pulls the poor lower. And it squeezes the middle until they disappear. The middle class used to be defined by owning a home, living on one salary, having savings, having stability, but today, that world is gone. Now the middle class is renting, paying loans, living paycheck to paycheck, trapped by rising costs, unable to save, unable to invest, and inflation is the reason. If you want to escape this trap, you must stop living like a middle-class worker and start thinking like a wealth builder. This doesn't mean being rich. It means thinking differently. Owning instead of renting, investing instead of saving, building instead of waiting, learning instead of complaining, using inflation instead of fearing it. This is how you rise even when the system pushes people down. You don't need to be rich to beat inflation. You only need to behave like someone who will become rich. Small investments every month, build active skills, own assets, even if tiny, avoid bad debt. Buy things that grow, stop chasing lifestyle, stop chasing trends, play the long game, stay consistent. Inflation destroys people who think short-term and rewards people who think long-term. This is why the rich stay rich, and why the future belongs to people who understand these rules today. Here is the simple plan anyone can follow. 1. Don't save too much cash. Only keep what you need. 2. Invest a part of your income consistently. 3. Buy assets that rise faster than prices. 4. Use good debt to buy good assets. 5. Build a skill that increases your income. 6. Cut lifestyle costs. They drain your future. 7. Think long-term. Inflation rewards patience. This is not magic. This is math. This is history. This is the pattern. And you can use it. You now understand something most people never learn. Inflation is not the enemy. It's the battlefield. If you don't prepare, inflation will take your future quietly. But if you learn the rules, if you follow the plan, if you start small and stay consistent, then inflation becomes your advantage, your engine, your opportunity. The rich are not lucky. They simply play a different game. And now you can too. If you're ready to learn the next step, subscribe, because the world is changing fast, and those who understand the system will own the future.